Hello and welcome back, everybody. We're going to get going on part 2 here. This is chapter 2 of Freemasonry and Catholicism, written by Max Heindel. Chapter 2, The Masonic Legend. Every mystic movement has its legend, which tells in symbolic language its status in the cosmic order and the ideal it tries to realize. From the Old Testament, containing the Atlantean mystery teaching, we learn that mankind were created male-female, bisexual, and that each one was capable of propagating his species without the cooperation of another, as is the case with some plants today. Later on, we are informed Jehovah removed one pole of the creative force from Adam, the early humanity, and there were henceforth two sexes. Okay, I'll just interject there. So, Jehovah was the one who removed one of the poles, thus genetically modifying humanity, splitting humanity from its former plant-like existence where it could reproduce from its own self, and then splitting the sexes. Okay, that's what it's talking about. It's not being perverted or anything like that when it says humanity was bisexual. We're speaking of just scientific facts about the way that humanity evolved over large periods of time. I know that when you view the pop culture version of any type of esotericism, they always point to, oh, look, oh, yeah, mankind's supposed to be bisexual. Yeah, that's why they're putting all this stuff in the music and everything. That's why the trans LGBT movement and all that stuff. No, esoteric philosophy actually has nothing to do with all these ridiculous politics that you see. At least not directly, yes. Philosophy underlies everything, of course. But esoteric philosophy does not promote the type of stuff that the communists, for lack of better terminology, are putting forth these days. So much stuff's taken out of context, so much stuff is demonized, and in my opinion, the reason why it is so this philosophy itself gets demonized, so the truth gets demonized. In my opinion, that's why you see a lot of Masonic symbolism injected into the debauchery of pop culture. That's why you see various elements of the esoteric philosophy weaved into pop culture. And you'll have certain commentators who want to make everything a Masonic conspiracy, everything an esoteric conspiracy, so on and so forth. But they never tell you that that is just the debased version of this. It is not what it actually truly means. Esoteric philosophy is nothing but pure truth at its core. That's really what it seeks to uncover, is the truth behind all things, the truth behind nature. It seeks to use God's creation as a book of understanding. The creation was the original Bible. But I went off on a tangent there, and I apologize, but I feel that that's important. Let's continue. I'll reread part of that. From the Old Testament, containing the Atlantean mystery teaching, we learn that mankind were created male, female, bisexual, and that each one was capable of propagating his own species without the cooperation of another, as is the case with some plants today. Later on, we are informed Jehovah removed one pole of the creative force of Adam, the early humanity, and that there were henceforth two sexes. The esoteric teaching supplements this information by stating that the purpose of this change was to use one pole of the creative force for the building of a brain and larynx, wherewith mankind might acquire knowledge and express themselves in speech and the intimate connection between these organs, brain, larynx, and genitals, is evident to anyone upon the slightest examination of facts. The boy's voice changing at puberty, the mental deficiency resulting from overindulgence of the passional nature, and the inarticulate speech of the mentally defective, which, along with many other facts, might be added to prove this assertion. What's being said there, to just break down in layman's terms, is that once Jehovah, the God of form, the God of material, created human, or didn't create, but separated the sexes, basically genetically modified the humanity of that time, which was quite different from the way we are now, and split the poles, whereas both poles were in one being. Now the beings would not put forth both of their poles. They would only exemplify one of the poles within their being, right? Hence, male and female. When he's talking about the brain and the larynx, what happened then is that pole, that singular pole, which we call male or female, depending on which representation of the pole is being exemplified, within each the male and female, that pole then split within itself, right? So much like cell division, now you've got a positive and a negative in male and female, but within each of those, it then split again, and that's what caused the generative organs and the brain and larynx. See, that creative force split once again, and it went one way in the body to create the brain and larynx up toward the head, and it split another way toward the bottom half of the body, creating the generative organs. And all of these are in direct connection with one another, hence why the male going through puberty's voice changes. The larynx and the genitals are directly connected. Okay, that's going to be important. Just remember that, because he will elaborate on this in chapters to come. According to the Bible, our earliest parents were forbidden to eat of the tree of knowledge, but Eve, seduced by the serpent, did eat and later induced man to follow her example. Who are the serpents and what is the tree of knowledge may also be determined from certain passages in the Bible. We are told, for instance, that Christ exhorted his disciples to be, quote, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. The so-called curse pronounced upon Eve after her confession stipulates that she must bear her children in sorrow and pain, and that the race will die. It has also been a great stumbling block to Bible commentators what connection there could be between the eating of an apple, death, and painful parturition. But when we are acquainted with the chaste expressions of the Bible, which designates the creative act by such passages as Adam knew Eve, and she bore Cain, Adam knew Eve, and she bore Abel. How can I bear a child, seeing I know not a man, etc.? It is very evident that the tree of knowledge is a symbolical expression of the creative act. Then it is plain that the serpents taught Eve how to perform the creative act, and that Eve instructed Adam. Therefore, Christ designated the serpents as harmful while admitting their wisdom. To get at the identity of the serpent, it is necessary to invoke the esoteric teaching which points them out as the martial Lucifer spirits, rulers of the serpentine sign Scorpio, and their initiates, even so late as the Egyptian dynasty, wore the uraeus, or serpent symbol, in the forehead as a sign of the source of their wisdom. Now that's interesting, and we can actually see the part that's interesting to me. I mean, it's all interesting, but let me just point something out that I just became aware of. Now, it's interesting And there are many levels of this as you study this, so there's not just one insight that you'll gain from this, but I just got one. It's interesting that just within society, within the way that humans work, it's always said that the female matures before the male does, right? And especially when going into puberty and stuff like that. And Eve, within the history of humanity, the Eve section of the two split male and female, it was the Eves, the women, who taught the men how to perform the creative act. They were therefore mature in that way and understood it before the males. It's just interesting to note. It's also interesting to note, I made this connection as well. It's just interesting that, you've always got your blue and red symbolism. You've always got everything splits into these positive and negatives. When you apply that to politics these days, now I know both sides are filled with corrupt crooks, don't get me wrong, but historically, if you look back at the Republican Party, which is red, that was the party that was always trying to get people to think for themselves, it was actually the Republican Party that was created to help free the slaves and whatnot. I know they tell you a different version of that, but it's not true. It's actually opposite from what they tell you. And it was the Democrats who tried to kick the fathers out of the homes in order for the mother to get state assistance, in order for the mothers to then be able to just go along with the collectivist narrative, right? It's interesting because it was the Jehovah's, it was Jehovah who originally kicked out the father of Cain, which was Lucifer, making Eve the widow, and then Eve's child, Cain, the son of the widow's son. Freemasons will understand this, but isn't it interesting how even so far back as in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer comes, impregnates Eve, she has Cain. Then Eve understands how to do this and teaches Adam. They have a child. But what does Jehovah do? Jehovah represents that blue, the water symbol, the collectivism. And what does Jehovah do? Banishes the serpent, kicks the serpent out so that the collectivism may still reign, right? But then by this time, Adam and Eve are already too far gone, so he kicks them both out. But that's interesting that's how, I don't want to get too political with this, but it's interesting how the Democrats are the ones who always push for welfare and whatnot, and they wouldn't allow the females to get welfare unless the male was kicked out of the home. So if you're insightful, you can go ahead and tie that together, and that it's not an arbitrary connection. You'll just notice that these concepts between individuality and collectivism replay themselves. They recapitulate themselves over and over again. It's quite fascinating. Let's continue. As a consequence of this unauthorized use of the creative force, humanity ceased to be ethereal and crystallized into the coats of skin or physical body, which now hides from them the gods who dwell in the invisible realms, and great was their sorrow at this loss. Generation had been originally established by the angels under Jehovah. It was then performed in great temples under propitious planetary conditions, and parturition was then painless, as it is today among wild animals where the creative function is not abused for the purpose of gratifying the senses. Degeneration resulted from the ignorant and unauthorized abuse inaugurated by the Lucifer spirits. Regeneration must be undertaken in order to restore man to his lost estate as a spiritual being, and to free him from this body of death wherein he is now encrusted. Death must be swallowed up of immortality. To attain this object, a covenant was made with humanity when expelled from the garden of God to wander in the wilderness of the world. According to that plan, a tabernacle was built after a pattern planned by the God Jehovah, and an ark, symbolical of the human spirit, was placed in it. Its staves were never taken out of their place to show that man is a pilgrim on the earth and may never rest until he reaches the goal. There was within it a golden pot with manna, in parentheses, man, fallen from heaven. Now you understand the mystery of what manna, which fell from heaven, was. People, this is just my interjection here. Sorry, I didn't make it known, but manna, many people have an idea of what this is. Some special food that people ate, on and on. There's many explanations, but the original esoteric teaching, mana meant man. Man, and the word man means mind. So it is the mind from heaven which comes down into incarnation. That is the manna from heaven. The mind. Man means mind. The manna from heaven is the mind which inhabits us. There was within a golden pot with manna fallen from heaven, together with a statement of the divine laws which he must learn in his pilgrimage through the wilderness of matter. And this symbolic ark contained also a magic wand, an emblem of the spiritual powers, called Aaron's rod, which is now latent in everyone on his way to the haven of rest, the mystic temple of Solomon. The Old Testament also tells how humanity was miraculously led and provided for, how after the warfare with the world they were given peace and prosperity by the before-mentioned king. In short, stripped of all embellishments, the story relates the salient facts of man's descent from heaven, his principal metamorphosis, his transgression of the laws of God, Jehovah, how he has been led in the past, and how Jehovah would wish to guide him in the future till he reaches the kingdom of heaven, the land of peace, and again docilely follows the lead of the divine ruler. The Masonic legend has points of variance as well as agreements with the Bible story. It states that Jehovah created Eve, that the Lucifer spirit Samael united with her, and that he was ousted by Jehovah and forced to leave her before the birth of her son Cain, who was thus the son of a widow. Then Jehovah created Adam to be the husband of Eve, and from their union Abel was born. Thus, from the beginning there were two kinds of people in the world, one begotten by the Lucifer spirit, Samael, and partaking of a semi-divine nature, imbued with the dynamic martial energy inherited from this divine ancestry, aggressive, progressive, full of initiative, but impatient of restraint or authority, whether human or divine. This class is loath to take things on faith and prone to prove all things by the light of reason. They believe in works rather than faith, and by their dauntless courage and inexhaustible energy, they have transformed the trackless wilderness of the world to a garden full of life and beauty, so lovely, in fact, that the sons of Cain have forgotten the garden of God, the kingdom of heaven, whence they were expelled by the decree of the lunar god Jehovah. Against him they are in constant rebellion because he has tied them by the umbilical cable tow. They have lost their spiritual sight and are imprisoned in the forehead of the body, where it is said Cain was marked, and must wander as prodigal sons in the comparative darkness of the material world, oblivious to their high and noble estate, until they find the door of the temple, and ask and receive light. Then, as Freemasons, or children of light, they are instructed in methods of building a new temple without sound of hammer. And when they have learned, they may, quote, travel in foreign countries to learn more of the craft. In other words, When the spirit realizes that it is far from its heavenly home, a prodigal, feeding upon the unsatisfactory husks of the material world, that apart from the Father, it is poor, naked, and blind, when it knocks at the door of a mystic temple like that of the Rosicrucians and asks for light, when it receives the desired instruction after due qualification in building an ethereal soul body, a temple or house eternal in the heavens, not made with hands and without sound of hammer, when its nakedness is clothed with that house, then the neophyte receives the Word, the open sesame to the inner worlds, and learns to travel in foreign parts, in the invisible worlds, where it takes soul flights into heavenly regions and qualifies for higher degrees under more direct instruction from the grand architect of the universe, who fashioned both heaven and earth. Such is the temperament of the widow's sons, inherited from their divine progenitor Samael, and given by him to their ancestor Cain. Their past history is a struggle with adverse conditions. Their achievement is victory wrested from all opposing forces by indomitable courage and persistent effort, unchecked by temporary defeat. On the other hand, while Cain, governed by divine ambition, toiled and tilled the soil to make 2 blades of grass grow where there were only one, Abel, the human progeny of human parents, felt no urge or unrest. Himself a creature of Jehovah through Adam and Eve, he was perfectly content to tend the flocks, also created by the God, and to accept a livelihood without initiative or labor from their divinely begotten increase. This docile attitude was most pleasing to the God Jehovah, who was extremely jealous of his prerogative as creator. Therefore, he cordially accepted the offering of Abel, obtained without effort or initiative, but scorned the offering of Cain, because derived from his own divine creative instinct akin to that of his own. Cain then slew Abel, but did not thereby exterminate the docile creatures of the God, for we are told, Adam knew Eve again, and she bore Seth. He had the same characteristics as Abel and transmitted them to his descendants, who to this day continue to trust the Lord for everything, who live by faith and not by work. By arduous and energetic application to the world's work, the sons of Cain acquired worldly wisdom and temporal power. They have been the captains of industry and masters of statecraft, but the sons of Abel, looking to the Lord for guidance, have become the receptacles for divine and spiritual wisdom. They constitute the priestcraft, and the animosity of Cain and Abel has been perpetuated from generation to generation among their respective descendants. Nor could it be otherwise, because one class, as temporal rulers, aimed to lift humanity to physical well-being through conquest of the material world, while their spiritual guides urge them to forsake the wicked world, the vale of tears, and look to God for comfort. One school aims to turn out master workmen, skilled in the use of tools wherewith they may wrest a livelihood from the earth, cursed by their divine adversary Jehovah. The other produces master magicians, skilled in the use of the tongue and in invocation, whereby they gain support from the toilers here and pray themselves and their charges into heaven hereafter. About the future in store for the sons of Cain and their followers, the temple legend is also most eloquent. It states that from Cain descended Methuselah, who invented writing, Tubal-Cain, a cunning worker in the metals, and Jubal, who originated music. In short, the sons of Cain are the originators of the arts and crafts. Therefore, when Jehovah chose Solomon, the scion of the race of Seth, to build a house for his name, the sublime spirituality of a long line of divinely guided ancestors flowered into conception of the magnificent temple called Solomon's Temple. Though he was only the instrument to carry over the divine plan revealed by Jehovah to David. But he was unable to execute the divine design in a material manner. Therefore, it became necessary for him to apply to King Hiram of Tyre, the descendant of Cain, who selected Hiram Abiff, the son of a widow, in parentheses, as all Freemasons are called because of the relation of their divine progenitor with Eve. Hiram Abiff became then Grand Master of the Army of Construction. In him the arts and crafts of all the sons of Cain who had gone before had flowered. He was skilled beyond all others in the work of the world, without which the plan of Jehovah must have remained a divine dream forever. It could never have become a concrete reality. The worldly acumen of the sons of Cain was as necessary to the completion of this temple as the spiritual conception of the sons of Seth, and therefore, during the period of construction, the two classes joined forces. The underlying enmity was hidden under a superficial show of amity. It was, indeed, the first attempt to unite them, and had that been accomplished, the world history from then on would have been altered in a very material manner. The sons of Cain, descended from the fiery Lucifer spirits, were naturally proficient in the use of fire. By it, they melted the metals hoarded by Solomon and his ancestors into altars, lavers, and vessels of various kinds. Pillars were fashioned by workmen under his direction, and arches to rest upon by them. The great edifice was nearing completion, and Hiram Abiff made ready to cast the molten sea, which was to be the crowning effort, his masterpiece. It was in the construction of this great work that the treachery of the sons of Seth became manifest and frustrated the divine plan of reconciliation when they tried to quench his fire with their natural weapon, water, and almost succeeded. The incidents which led up to this catastrophe, their meaning, and the sequel will be related in the next chapter. There we've got a picture. Hiram Abiff, King Solomon, and King Hiram of Tyre. And that's going to do it for chapter 2. Keep following along and keep in mind and really meditate on these symbols, because everything we're reading right now is symbolic. It is symbolic on many levels. And this is such a revealing text. I've read this probably more than 10 times, start to finish. And every time I get something new from it, because we've got to remember we're dealing with, each thing means something. When they speak of Jehovah, we're speaking to form. It denotes form, materiality. Okay? When we speak of Lucifer, it denotes mind, thought. And then you've got your Christ figures, which are the balance between those. Okay? So that's where like your Tubal Cains come in, and characters like that. So Tubal Cain represented he was of the line of Cain, which is of the line of intellect, which it says in the lore, it will have to be someone from the line of intellect who is smart enough to recognize there's a problem that needs to be fixed. Because if you're from the line of just the followers, you'll never go out of your way enough to think for yourself to recognize that there's actually a problem that needs to be fixed. So it will be the one from the sons of intellect who will recognize the problem and then thus try to correct it. That's what the lore says. And so that's why Tubal Cain, or Hiram Abiff, tries to cast the molten sea. The molten sea was that reconciliation between the schools of fire and the schools of water. But the schools of water did not want that reconciliation, so they sabotaged it so they could retain power for this much longer. Look how long the Catholic Church has had power. But that's only societally. These truths are just, they reveal themselves on many, many levels. It's a formula. It's essentially like an algorithm that just keeps playing itself out. And you'll notice it everywhere. That's why you can make relations to the core principles of the political parties all the way on back to the symbolism of fire and water when they first ever presented themselves, because they're going to do the same types of things, just in a different context in whatever time period they manifest. Anyway, we're approaching 32 minutes now, so I noticed these are pretty short chapters. I'd like to keep them short, and we can talk more in the next one. So thanks again. Like, subscribe, share with only those who you think are ready. And that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again. Take care, everybody. God bless.